No drugs in my system. I did.
Why?
Why did you kill the 3-year-old girl?
After admitting to doing something absolutely horrific to a little girl, there's no chance this Louisiana man will ever get out of prison.
But we have a very active scene here right now, very traumatic scene, very tragic scene, the death of a 4-year-old child.
But there's so much to this case, we're only at the tip of the iceberg. Thanks for joining us at Law&Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner. Daniel Wayne Callihan pleaded guilty to charges of kidnapping resulting in death and transporting a minor in interstate commerce. Now, this comes after he allegedly stabbed the girl's mother multiple times before kidnapping both of her daughters.
I don't think any of us can ever determine what a motive for this particular type of crime would be.
After his arrest, Daniel Callihan was swarmed by local reporters to ask him the question that was on everyone's mind. Did he kill 4-year-old Erin Burnett? And this is what he had to say.
Did you kill Erin Burnett?
Unfortunately, on Lexapro, sober, no drugs in my system, I did.
But how did we get here? We got to go back to June of last year. That's when the body of Erin's mom, Callie, was found inside her home. Callie was discovered by her relatives, who called 911. It was a horrific scene. Callie was covered in blood. According to police, she had been stabbed multiple times, like dozens of times. Her car was missing, and if that wasn't shocking enough, her daughters were missing too. Her daughters were young. Callie had a 6-year-old daughter, and she had 4-year-old Erin. Now, officials issued an Amber Alert. Then investigators got an alert of a suspicious person. That person was in Callie's car. Now, he reportedly led police on a car chase, leading authorities right to where the girls were. But it sadly wasn't the news anyone was hoping for.
Tragic scene that we're working here in South Jackson. Jackson police officers were called to 3950 Bossier to assist the U.S. Marshals. They have been looking for an individual wanted out of Louisiana, Mr. Callihan. After a short pursuit, they made contact with him and he's now in custody. As you know, an Amber Alert was issued for 2 young children that were supposedly with him. Mr. Callihan is also a suspect in a homicide that happened in Tangible Hope Parish, Louisiana. Upon a search of the area by Jackson police officers, they located a deceased child in the woods. We suspect that to be one of the children that he had in his possession, that he had illegally taken away from Tangible Hope Parish in Louisiana. One of the child, the 6-year-old, my understanding, has been taken to the hospital to receive treatment, but my understanding the 4-year-old is deceased in the woods. We're still trying to determine the manner of death, but we have a very active scene here right now, very traumatic scene, very tragic scene, the death of a 4-year-old child, but the suspect is in custody.
So who was their suspect, Daniel Wayne Callihan? Why would he allegedly kidnap Erin and her sister, take them all the way from Larenger, Louisiana to Jackson, Mississippi? Which, if you think about it, that ride must have been terrifying for Erin and her sister. It's about 2 hours from Larenger to Jackson by car. They aren't with their mom, they're with a strange man. They were reportedly heard crying and screaming from their neighbors. During Daniel's interrogation with police, he allegedly confessed to murdering Callie and 4-year-old Erin. He allegedly admitted to stabbing Callie multiple times. He admitted he stole Callie's car, which he took from Louisiana to Mississippi, and allegedly admitted to smothering 4-year-old Erin. According to police, there was a purpose he kept her sister alive, and for a horrific, disturbing reason. According to the probable cause affidavit, he had intentions on keeping the 6-year-old alive to keep her as a sex slave. According to court documents, Daniel allegedly said he wanted to murder Callie for a long time. Lots of the probable cause affidavit was redacted, but it seemed like Daniel Callihan left a bunch of breadcrumbs for him to be found. His sister told authorities that she got messages from him through Callie's Facebook, and that her brother allegedly used the account to tell her that he needed gas money and to send it through Cash App. She said she didn't send him any money. She called the cops and reportedly warned them he was violent. But there was someone who was allegedly willing to help him.
When did she and Callihan meet up? Where did they meet up? What did she witness? What did she do?
According to officials, after allegedly killing Callie and kidnapping her girls, he took Callie's car to Macon, Mississippi. Then he returned Callie's car to Louisiana, where he picked up his alleged co-conspirator, Victoria Cox.
Sheriff's Office obtained some information that an adult female was with Callihan and the 2 minor children at some point, I think on Wednesday. in Jackson, Mississippi, in a motel. So obviously, we passed that information along to our partners in Jackson and gave them that information. They followed that up. They went to the motel. They found Victoria Cox, age 33, I believe. She was detained by them, and they began their investigation of her.
Victoria wasn't just riding along. She, according to prosecutors, allegedly engaged in sexual battery with Callie's 6-year-old daughter. Prosecutors say after that happened, Daniel purposely suffocated Erin by holding her closely against his chest. Even though Daniel admitted to murder, Victoria Cox was charged with it too. She was indicted on charges including capital murder, kidnapping, and sexual battery charges. Victoria reportedly wiped away tears when the prosecution read her charges out loud, and she pleaded not guilty to those charges out of Mississippi. As for Daniel, he faced charges in Louisiana, Mississippi, and he faced federal charges. In Louisiana, he was indicted on murder and kidnapping charges. And last year, the state announced he would be facing the death penalty. He pleaded not guilty to the charges of first-degree murder, kidnapping, plus more. And like Victoria, he was charged in Mississippi, too, on charges of capital murder, kidnapping, and battery. And federally, he was charged with kidnapping resulting in death and transporting a minor in interstate commerce with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. But news came down last week he's pleading guilty in his federal case to spare him from the death penalty. In a press release, acting U.S. Attorney Michael Simpson said, "Today's resolution ensures that Daniel Wayne Callihan will be held accountable for his heinous and atrocious crimes. This successful prosecution is the result of significant collaboration by local, state, and federal agencies across Louisiana and Mississippi. Their collective dedication and hard work ensured that Mr. Callihan will now face justice." Daniel will be sentenced in his federal case in November, and according to federal prosecutors under the plea agreement, his sentences for his charges could run concurrent or consecutive, but he's looking at life either way. Let me ask you something. How much time do you think your business team is wasting buried in spreadsheets, chasing down receipts, and reconciling endless rows of bank statements? Yeah, probably a little too much. That's where Odoo Accounting steps in. Odoo gives users a clean, modern accounting dashboard that shows you exactly what you need. Your bank balances, cash flow, vendor bills, customer invoices, all in one place. It's intuitive, easy to navigate, and for anyone managing their business's accounting, it's invaluable. You know why Odoo will give your business a cutting edge? Odoo uses smart AI with a 98% recognition rate to automatically generate invoices and vendor bills. So all you have to do is review and validate, and that's it. And their bank reconciliation is next level. Odoo connects with more than 28,000 banks to automatically match your transactions with your financial records to give you pinpoint accuracy, so no more guesswork. Need reports? Odoo's got everything from your balance sheet to your cash flow statements, professionally formatted and instantly accessible. So if you've been doing all of this accounting work manually, you can stop this instant. Automate invoices, vendor bills, and accounting workflow with Odoo today. Get a free 15-day trial today at www.odoo.com/LCNewsAccounting and see what your business has been missing with Odoo. I'm joined now by criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson Ferrer. Safa, great to see you, but this story is just horrific. It's horrible, it's gruesome, it's shocking. I mean, the facts of the case are you have a mother who was murdered in her home, her daughters were kidnapped, and then a 4-year-old Erin was killed too, and then her 6-year-old sister was injured, but thankfully she's okay. But what's your reaction to this case? It's just horrible. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, this case is absolutely horrific. And I think this case is anybody's worst nightmare, especially a mom who was in a dating situation with someone who ultimately kills them and then harms their children. And for anybody in the public or community that cares about, women and children and things of that nature, it's just really sad. It's really gruesome. It's really difficult to handle a case like this on both sides, even so as like a prosecutor or a defense attorney, because of the gruesome nature of the allegations.
And when we talk about the gruesome nature, I mean, stabbed dozens and dozens and dozens of times, then kidnapping just little girls. Do you think that was his plan all along? Do you think that this was premeditated? He had this going on in his head and he was just like, I'm gonna execute this plan, this terrible, disgusting plan?
It's really hard to say. On one hand, a case of this nature, it's not uncommon where there have probably been prior instances of domestic violence. And from what we know of the case, this woman and this male had been in an on-again, off-again relationship. So I guarantee you that there were some domestic violence or things of that nature that had been occurring in the relationship. And so when you have a situation where someone is stabbing somebody 50 times, that is something that is so passionate, so horrific, that there's a good chance that this was deemed, a crime of passion, and, something just took over this individual. But on the other end, there seemed to have been a calculated plan where he was going to kidnap these girls. He got a co-conspirator involved to flee the area. That individual also participated in the alleged sexual abuse of one of these young ladies. And so, that portion of it does seem to somewhat be premeditated, if not premeditated completely.
Right, especially because, they are little girls, and it does seem premeditated in the sense of you have one who, again, according to the affidavit, was kept around just for the purposes of sex. When you think about that with a child, when you think about that altogether, just horrible. I truly have no words. Then you talk about kind of transporting these girls from Louisiana, their home, where unfortunately and sadly their mom was killed, all the way to Mississippi. The children were heard screaming. There were other aspects, including that there were cages found at that home, small animal cages at that. It really seems like it was kind of like a house of horrors. And I think to me what was surprising is most defendants normally, especially when they're accused of doing something horrible, they say, it wasn't me, I didn't do it. They deny. But he actually admitted to murdering 4-year-old Erin on live local news. Were you surprised he was just so forthcoming and just so laissez-faire about doing something so horrible?
It's unfortunately not surprising when you're dealing with a psychopath or an alleged psychopath. And that seems to be what this individual probably is and who he is. And so the fact that he disclosed this on live television, admitted it without any real resistance to it, really tells me that, he has some type of sick mental something going on with him mentally. And not only that, but that he found it gratifying to an extent to say, yeah, I did this. And what are you going to do about it? Because I've already done it. So unfortunately, not surprising when you're dealing with an individual who has that sort of mental capacity going on.
Yeah, it seems like he kind of wanted the notoriety of it. And I want to go back to a point you had made earlier in our discussion about the co-conspirator in terms of just everything that she allegedly did, and we still have to say allegedly. What do you make of just her role in this entire case? You have a woman who helps allegedly in the kidnapping of 2 young girls after their mother was killed. I mean, I can't imagine that she would get anything besides possibly life in prison, but do you think that there's at all a possibility she might get a lower sentence?
Again, the allegations with her are gruesome in nature, just as much as this individual or the male defendant here. And not only that, but they're sick. They're sick in nature. The allegations here with respect to her acts in trafficking these little girls and what's alleged to have done between her and the 6-year-old child in this case. And so the one thing that she could possibly argue is if she was under the threat and physical force of the defendant, in this case, Mr. Callihan, that would probably be the only way that she can get out of full liability for this, unless she's in front of a jury and there's just simply not enough evidence to convict her. But I think a case of this nature, when you've got multiple murders, you've got sex trafficking, and the victims are young children, juries do not like that, and they absolutely do not sympathize with that, especially a Louisiana jury.
Right. And then the other aspect too is that one of the victims is still living. Now she's without her sister, and I'm keeping her name private, obviously for privacy concerns and for her safety and all of that stuff. But I look through her mother's Facebook account, and you just see the 2 daughters always together, like 2 peas in a pod. I think that's what the obituary read, which is just horrible. But when you have a case where there is a living victim, and that being a young child, I can't imagine a possibility they would call the child to testify. But do you think, I know that there's kind of a separation between the federal case, the state case. If the state case does continue to move forward, do you think that it's possible that the surviving victim will have to testify?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a high probability, and I would go on to say a 100% likelihood that she will have to testify in the event that the state charges were to go to trial. And one of the things that the prosecution and the defense ultimately might do or concede to is some sort of plea agreement, which we know was done with Mr. Callihan on the federal side. We believe, or we know at this point, he's entered into a plea agreement they've removed the death penalty from the table, but he will spend the rest of his life in prison. And one of the reasons they do that is because with respect to the sex trafficking charge, and this being a minor, that the government has to prove that. Part of the way they prove that is by putting this young child on the stand to testify that as to her age and what she remembers or recalls from the incident. And not only that, but we know she was injured as well. So she will ultimately have to testify to what her injuries were. If they enter into a plea agreement, which again could happen on the state end with respect to her as the victim, to avoid having to put her on the stand to testify, to avoid having to re-victimize her, they may enter into a plea agreement there as well.
And it's interesting you bring that up too, because I'm always curious, you know, if he's sentenced to life in prison in a federal case like this one, what kind of extra hold does the state case have on this? Does the federal case kind of trump the state case? How does that all work?
So the federal jurisdiction and the state jurisdictions, they are two separate jurisdictions. So he can be prosecuted in both, and we call that a lateral prosecution. Now, the federal case has been resolved, and again, the plea agreement is that they will not go forward with the death penalty, which they could have gone forward with that should he have been convicted at a trial. Now, on the state case, he's still facing the death penalty with respect to the murders. Now, whether or not the state government will come to some sort of plea agreement to remove the possibility of the death penalty is to be determined at this point, but they could still go forward and still make that request. And if a jury finds it as a death qualifying offense or that he is to receive death either by judge or jury who makes that decision, then he will face the death penalty stateside.
And do you see a possibility where these sentences, you know, with these different jurisdictions, these different cases, that these sentences could run consecutively, concurrently? What are your thoughts if you could look into a crystal ball?
I don't think that they're going to run concurrent. I think the federal charges, he has pled guilty to a number of charges in federal court. And so I believe 2 of those charges will run concurrent. And there are other charges that will run consecutive on the federal charges. So I believe that the sex trafficking is going to run concurrent. The charge that he's facing the life sentence on will run concurrent to another charge. The state charges will not run concurrent to the federal charges. Those will be handled on their own. And, you know, if he's convicted on the multiple murders stateside, then maybe they can run those concurrent, or he might run the sentence concurrent. But considering the gruesome nature of these charges, I don't think a judge is going to have any sympathy when sentencing Mr. Callihan to whatever he will be sentenced to.
And unfortunately, we can't get inside to get a good look at that because in the federal cases, we know no cameras are allowed, unfortunately, but we'll be keeping our eyes out to see what that sentence will ultimately be. Safa Robinson-Ferrer, I want to thank you so much for your time and your insight into this case. Before we sign you off, though, anything else you would like to add?
Thank you for having me, as always.
I did reach out to the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office, and they tell me while Daniel Callihan pleaded guilty in federal court, he hasn't been adjudicated in his state charges in Louisiana or Mississippi. As for Victoria Cox, she was supposed to go on trial earlier this year. Then that got continued to December 8th. And if convicted, she could face the death penalty. Thanks so much for joining us here at Law and Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner.